قبل عربات الرومان الرباعية، قبل أول سباق جائزة كوبرا في فرنسا، قبل الفورمولا 1 كانت هناك بلاد الرافدين، العجلة، المركبة، الكونغا، وربما أول متسابق في تاريخ البشرية. هذه هي القصة الخفية لكيف أصبح الشرق الأوسط المهد الحقيقي للسباقات. فتابعونا. Before Roman quadrigas, before the first Grand Prix in France, before Formula 1, there was Mesopotamia. The wheel, the chariot, the conga, and perhaps the first racer in human history. This is the hidden story of how the Middle East became the true origin of racing.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we are talking about what a very exciting matter. Racing didn't start in Europe, it started in Middle East. This is the thesis of the Race of Kingdoms team, and that's why I started with this amazing project, because when I discovered that the wheel was invented in Sumeria, the chariot was invented in Sumeria, and the first ever racing artifact was discovered in Sumeria, as Professor Bulliet from Columbia University told me, then it was shocking for me. So we have the honor to have Professor Bulliet with us in this podcast. And today we are not telling a story, we are challenging one. What if the Roman quadrigas weren't the origin of speed? What if the motorsport was not invented in France, in Le Mans, with the first Grand Prix, what is considered the first Grand Prix, and racing was invented in Mesopotamia? To explore all this, I'm joined today by Professor Richard Bulliet. Professor Richard Bulliet is a Professor Emeritus of History at Columbia University in New York, and he's one of the world's leading experts on Middle Eastern history and the history of technology. He is the author of several influential books, including The Wheel, Inventions and Reinventions, and The Camel and the Wheel. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
We are happier than you, and much honor to have you here today with us, Professor. Okay, the first block, let's try to define racing. What is racing? So, racing requires three things. Can you walk us through that, Professor, please?
Yes, you have to have wheels that rotate at the ends of the axles. You have to have a source of power. Normally, that means harnessing animals prior to motor cars and so on. And you have to have a surface that you can go over at a rapid pace.
Fantastic. So those are three ingredients that we had in Mesopotamia long time ago than Rome and Europe, isn't it?
Yes. The nice thing about Mesopotamia is that you have a lot of flat desert that you can go on without trees. Europe was heavily forested.
Yes. Yeah, indeed.
So the surface available in Mesopotamia is different than you would have in other places where wheels were first used.
Can you tell us what Sumeria was? What is, to the current countries, what was included in Sumeria, in the old Sumeria?
Well, Sumeria is southern Iraq. It is basically the area of Iraq south of Baghdad and edging over into Arabia.
Northern Saudi Arabia, probably Kuwait also, and part of Jordan also maybe?
I suspect Kuwait, but Jordan is probably a little too far to be included. It's hard to know. We have very little evidence, and we have to read into the evidence we have. But the animals were probably available in Jordan.
Yeah. So according to what you are saying, the Middle East was the origin of speed, correct?
The first place where humans felt the wind in their face as they sped across the desert. Yes, I think it's the origin of speed, which is a very unnatural feeling for humans.
What a nice definition, Professor. Yeah, the birth of racing, as we say in the Race of Kingdoms theme. Okay, tell us now about the technical issue that really made possible speed and the birth of racing. The key question is not just where the wheel appeared, but when the wheel became capable of speed. Tell us more about this, please, Professor.
Correct. You have two types of ancient wheels. One type is two wheels at the end of the axles, and the entire unit rotates at the same time. You have this in mine cars, you have this in railroads down to the present day, and that is called a wheel set. The problem with a wheel set for racing is that it cannot easily turn a corner because the wheels are all spinning at the same speed. So the wheel set is seemingly invented in southeastern Europe, probably in the Carpathian Mountains, and very likely used for carrying copper ore in mining. The second type of wheel, invented about 500 years later, was one where the axle had a wheel at each end, and the wheels would rotate each at its own speed. In other words, the axle remained stationary, but the wheels turned. That made it possible to steer because
Yes.
it could turn corners.
Yes.
The problem with those wheels is that they're extremely heavy, and they weighed perhaps solid wood, maybe 70 pounds per wheel.
Wow.
If the wheel set was invented before 3500 BC, the rotating wheels came along between 3000 and 3500 BC. They're a little bit later. They're used more in Ukraine and in Central Asia than they are
Yes.
elsewhere, but they had them in Sumer.
Fantastic. So, as you sent me in one of your papers, that have reduced friction, greater efficiency, higher potential speed, and improved control, and also capable to turn, which is basic for racing, right?
Yes. The wheel eventually developed spokes, which made the wheel much, much lighter. But that didn't happen in the Middle East. That happened in Central Asia. And that then moves into Europe. But in the Sumer period, you had solid wheels that rotated independently at the ends of the axles. We have images of men who would ride on a vehicle pulled on a two-wheeled vehicle pulled by horse-like animals across the desert, and that appears in Mesopotamia earlier than you have it for the later chariots of the Europeans.
Yeah.
Chariots developed around 2000 BC, but you have Sumerian images go back to about 3000 BC.
It's clearly they invented racing, as we say, in Middle East. Okay, so once we have the machine and the machine capable to turn with the independently axles, the missing element is the power source. Where comes from this at that time in Sumeria?
When the wheel sets were invented in mining in the Carpathian Mountains, there were no animals. Humans pulled the wheeled vehicle, the cart, in the mines. And then you started to get cattle, oxen being used to pull heavy vehicles across Central Asia that were usually used for people migrating to new lands. But what you had in Mesopotamia for a long time was a mystery, because you have a native animal that belongs to the horse family, and it's called an onager, and the Persian onager and the Syrian onager, and that's a wild animal. We don't have any domestic onagers. And the problem was that in 3000 BC, we have images of vehicles being pulled by horse-like animals, but there are no horses. Horses are far, far away in Central Asia.
Yes.
So the question was, how could you have used these onagers to pull a fast vehicle if they were wild animals?
Yes.
Rather, in 2022, it was discovered through DNA analysis that there were hybrid animals in Mesopotamia that were a cross between a domestic donkey and a Syrian
And the
onager.
onagers. Yeah.
And
Wow.
the cross between a donkey and a horse is a mule.
Yes.
But before you had mules, you had these rather valuable animals that were a cross between the onager and the donkey. And the word for that animal is a kunga.
Kunga. Yeah.
So we appear to have kungas used to pull vehicles
Yes.
from 3000 BC onward until the kunga stops being used.
Yeah.
And it stops being used, I think, because once the donkeys and the horses became connected in the same territory, then you had the mule created, and I think that the mule destroyed the market for the Kunga.
For the Kunga. But the Kunga, as you are telling us, was probably a very strong and powerful animal. Again, capable of top speeds at that point.
Yes, particularly if you had four of them pulling at the same time, which you have in Mesopotamia.
Professor, next thing we are going to talk now about the copper figurine. You sent me some information, and I read in your information that the copper figurine, it's a Mesopotamian artifact that may represent the earliest evidence of a racing vehicle in history. So this is the proof that racing was invented in Middle East, right?
Yes, I think that there are many images of four-wheeled vehicles from Sumer used for military purposes. But a four-wheeled vehicle could not turn very well. And for military purposes, it was very heavy. And it would be unlikely that you would race a vehicle like that. But you do have a two-wheeled vehicle that appears. And in the two-wheeled vehicles, the rider is shown, he's not wearing armor, he's not carrying weapons. He's simply mounted on a very, very small two-wheeled vehicle behind the animals. And sometimes you have two animals, but in this one copper vehicle, you have four animals.
Yes.
Now, imagine getting on a tiny wheeled vehicle that is attached by leather straps to four fast horse-like animals.
Yes.
That is the origin of speed, I think.
This is probably the equivalent now to a sports car or a GT car now.
Yes, because you want it, if you're going fast, you want to have very lightweight in the vehicle. And also, when you see the image of the four animals pulling the vehicle, you see that the rider has really a seat between his knees. It's not a fully built out vehicle.
Yes.
It is one where he is using his knees to hold himself upright behind the animals.
Yeah, and that's why probably, Professor Bulliet, this is probably why people in Middle East is so keen on motorsports. It's clearly there 5,000 years ago already.
It was there 5,000 years ago. And then you had, once horses came into the area, we know that they raced horses. You have hippodromes in certain Roman cities. And then, rather unexpectedly, the wheeled vehicles disappeared. And that disappearance had to do with the rise of pack camels carrying goods. And the ox carts and the chariots disappeared.
Yes, of course. Yeah, fantastic. So the conclusion would be of this talk that obviously a small chariot with no weapons, no shields whatsoever, and with four horses, the only sensible use was racing, right, Professor?
I think that is the most likely use. And actually, there is one Indian myth. It's from a little bit east of, it's not in the center of India, but more in Afghanistan. And it's a story about how the gods had a chariot race, and each god had a different animal pulling its chariot. So one god had cattle, one god had horses, one god had mules. And it appears that one of the gods had kungas. And even though it's a little difficult to determine, but the idea of racing connected with gods becomes very important in the mythology later on of Europeans who believe that the gods rode in chariots.
Wow, amazing. Okay, so my personal project now, Race of Kingdoms, is just based on this and just based in this heritage and history. And what I want with Race of Kingdoms is the Middle East, claiming back what is theirs and generating again a very rooted to the land, their own ecosystem, their own racing ecosystem with 7 different racing categories, and with the 7 kingdoms, well, actually 3 kingdoms, 3 emirates and 1 sultanate of Middle East, all together in an ecosystem with a very nice aroma, because of the history and heritage and because of the royal countries involved. Okay, I've got now a quick fire for you, Professor. The quick fire being, I tell you one sentence or one word, and one sentence or one word in return. Okay, so let's start with the quick fire. Origin of racing.
Origin of racing, Middle East, particularly in Mesopotamia.
Fantastic. Racing begins with
pulling small vehicles across the Iraqi desert.
wow. The wheel.
The wheel comes from farther north in Europe, but the type of wheels in Mesopotamia are better suited for racing than the ones in Europe.
Is the wheel the biggest invention ever?
I do not think that the wheel is the most important invention ever. Many societies that knew about wheels did not use them.
Early vehicles were built for?
Early vehicles were built for carrying loads and for helping people move from place to place.
Copper figurine.
Copper figurine from the Sumerian period is a racing vehicle that is not a military vehicle.
Ancient drivers.
The costume you have from the images from Sumer indicates that they are high status individuals, but not religious individuals.
Motivation for speed.
Motivation for speed. You feel the wind in your face and you go in a way that humans were not designed to go.
I like this one. First, real racing condition.
You need to have the wheeled vehicle, you need to have the source of power and the animals that pull it, and you need a flat, unencumbered surface. I think that the origin of speed, humans are not designed for going fast, except that they exhaust themselves if they run. But to be pulled, to have something that is transporting you, is a thrilling thing down to the present day.
Yes, correct, completely correct. And I've got from one of our collaborators in Race of Kingdoms, Abdul Hadi. He's a motorsports agent living in Emirates, based in Emirates. I've got a couple of technical questions for you. First one, it took 500 years after the beginning of the Bronze Age to invent the axle and wheel. Why couldn't inventors of that time find a way to reduce friction between the axle and the wheel?
The question of the first wheel sets did not have any friction between the axle and the wheel because the axle and the wheel turned at the same time. Once you had the wheels rotating at the ends of the axle, there was a problem with friction. And that problem with friction continues on through history. But it appears that what they used was animal fat or some sort of oil to try and lubricate the friction and reduce it.
Fantastic. Very well, Professor. That was all from my side. Anything else you want to tell us about the history, racing, origin of speed, birth of racing, or whatever you want to say?
One thing I should say is that when the wheeled vehicles disappeared with the coming of pack camels and caravans, the roads pretty much disappeared because the camels do not need to have a flat road or a paved road. And the result was that the Middle East comes into the modern era without a highway system. And that means that unlike Europe, where you had mud roads that were deeply rutted and extremely difficult to go through, here you had the chance to build a road system that was in a flat, treeless country, and it was an ideal place for vehicles to go in competition with one another in racing, because they do not have a history of slow, muddy, rutted, difficult roads to pass. And in a sense, not having roads, I think, produced an opportunity for speed. And, when you see it in the Gulf area, you realize that probably more fast driving in modern times in the Gulf area than any other natural place, because the terrain is designed seemingly for that purpose.
Yes, I completely agree. And you can tell also, Professor, that the car culture is really inside the Arab world, and specifically in Middle East is something really gigantic, let's say. Yeah.
Dubai, and you see people with Ferraris. It's this very small country. They don't have as much space to let go, and everything is.
But probably they go to Jeddah, to see the Formula One, and they come back.
Yes, they love it, and I can understand why.
Fantastic, Professor. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much for involving me in this. And if there's anything further I can do for you, just let me know.
Yeah, but I will for sure, because it's a fascinating topic for me. It's been a huge discovery for me, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you as usual and learn from you. Thanks very much, Professor. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.